Good morning, everyone. We will begin day 2 of our conference for the Syria Ukraine Network. The conference is about accountability and justice, new ways of thinking, and clearly over the past few decades with all the conflicts we have seen, we see that the conflicts are only rising, the victims are rising, and yet, you know, the international system as it is not working the way it should. So this conference is about figuring out new ways of thinking, what we can do to minimize the loss of civilians and to basically make sure that autocrats do not overturn the world order. Thank you very much. Our first panel will be Victims Are Not Numbers.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to the second day of our summit. I'm very, very grateful here to be moderating this panel with some of amazing people that I'm joined here with today. We have Dr. Ahmad Aldbis, the Operations Director of the Union of Medical Relief and Care Organization, UOSSM. And joining us online is Omar, the Director of Detainees Affairs at the Syrian Emergency Task Force. He'll be with us online. And then Maria Avdeeva, the Strategic Communications Expert at Ukrinform. And then Elly Nott, the co-founder and CEO of the David Nott Foundation. And lastly, but not least, Evelina Kurlitz, the Executive Director of Razom, Ukraine. The panel today is titled "Victims Are Not Numbers," and it's dedicated to the victims and the war crimes, the victims of the war crimes against humanity that have taken place on our people, and kind of humanizing and the human effects of wars and conflict and the lack of sufficient response from the international community that we see every day. When we talk about the victims or the survivors of war crimes, so whether that be detainees, internally displaced people, refugees, the murdered and the injured, we always talk about numbers and we say, you know, it's 100,000 or it's up to 1 million or up to this and up to that. Unfortunately, we do have to do that because that's the way that organizations respond, and they like to look at statistics and they'd like to do their charts, and that takes away so much of humanizing these victims that have lived the worst crimes of our century. I personally am Syrian Circassian, so in the 1800s, Russia genocided our people and kicked us out of our homeland and killed up to 1 million Circassians. And these records are in Georgia, Tbilisi, and they're Russian records of the million Circassians that they killed. And then fast forward to today, in 2015, Russia came into my now country and massacred Syrians over and over and over again. So we just need to focus on this, and I'm grateful to have this discussion and how we can humanize these numbers and these statistics, whether that be internationally or in Syria or in Ukraine. So yeah, this is kind of the overall of what this panel is going to be about. And to begin, I did want to have Omar on, and I wanted to have him start off this discussion and tell us about, as a previous detainee, and he was detained at 15 years old, being a key eyewitness to Assad's war crimes in Syria on innocent civilians. Ahmad, can you tell us what you think about the statement titling this panel, "Victims Are Not Numbers"?
Thank you, Celine. And I wish I had better circumstances and the honor to meet you at better circumstances. Slava Ukraine, that's something good to start with always. I come from a place where we have a huge number of victims. Almost 1 million Syrians have been killed and over 2 million have been tortured. And now we have over 250,000 people who are forcibly disappeared. These are huge numbers. And let me start with our biggest mistake in Syria. We showed the most brutal pictures anyone can show of what's happening in Syria. We normalized the idea of a dead Syrian person, and that was one of our mistakes. We should have been more considerate in the way we tell the stories of the individuals. So I try to do that all the time today. There are so many people that have so meaningful stories, and knowing what I know today, learning what I have learned today from how the world react to our stories, I would never show the picture of the massacres that happened in my hometown that killed my father and my brothers. I would not show the 55,000 pictures of people who died under torture with all the torture marks on their bodies. I would rather tell their stories, starting with the beautiful part of it, how it was before the war started and how it ended today. What's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Syria is tragic. Russia is a common enemy, we all in Syria, we have even China and Iran involved, and Iran supported Russia in its invasion of Ukraine, and that's something so disturbing to learn about, that dictatorships around the world are so strong together. They support each other. They sacrifice so much for each other. On the other side, it's clear that democracies, they hesitate a lot before they support each other. Like in Syria, millions of people went out to the street asking for freedom and democracy. What help did we get? Very little to nothing. More than a few Twitter statements condemning the Assad regime, and now bringing Assad regime back to the international community by many countries. And that's our big problems, where democracies are not ready to sacrifice a little bit to provide support and take the risk to provide support to countries to populations that are asking for freedom. I'm speaking to you today from Taiwan. Taiwan is one of the very thriving democracies in the region where I am right now, sitting next to a very, very scary, monster, China, who is considering all possible ways of actually removing this democracy and taking over Taiwan. I come here and the people have fought. They sacrificed a lot to have made it and have democracy today. And that's something people are fighting to protect in Ukraine, and Syrians are fighting to get in Syria. Unless we are ready to sacrifice a lot, we will not gain anything. 12 years later in Syria, a huge number of people dead, yet the Syrian people go out to the street, peacefully protest, and then there is armed forces fighting against the Syrian regime. There is the lie of political solution. A strong power, a strong dictator would never go for a political solution. A political solution for a dictator means that they will end up being prosecuted for their crimes against humanity. Ceasefire, political solution in Syria was never a real thing. It was always a lie to give the regime more time to restructure its lines and attack again. I would doubt if it's better when it comes to the Russian position on Ukraine. A dictator like that would never accept a real political solution unless it's their own benefit that's the higher. And when their benefit is higher and more important than yours, then you're not winning. You are submitting. It breaks our heart to see people dying in so many places in the world. At the same time, it brings a lot of joy to knowing that there are people who are fighting for their freedom, for their dignity, for their independence, for every good cause. And from the day we went out to the street in Syria asking for freedom, we learned to have empathy with anyone who is asking for freedom and democracy. So from where I am in Taiwan, a very free democracy, to Syria, to Ukraine, I wish at some point, and I work for it like you are, to one day thrive in a democracy that's not threatened by a neighbor or by its own government. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Yeah, it's important to have those discussions. And I want to hear next from Maria. Tell us about your perspective on this panel's topic, and we're also going to watch a little bit of something that you're going to tell us about.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for putting up this very important conference, and especially this panel. My name is Maria Avdeeva. I'm from Kyiv, Ukraine, and before full-scale invasion started, I worked as a researcher and security analyst on Russian disinformation. And since 24th February, my focus changed a lot, and I stayed in Kharkiv during the full-scale invasion, and I started to document Russian war crimes by speaking about people affected by the war. And this is why I think that it's so important that you talk about victims, because the best way to show what the war brings to the country is to show personal stories. Since then, I have been working as a producer with some international media, traveling along front lines in Ukraine. And during this period of time, also the focus was to show a story of a person, because by showing these stories to international audience, it's much easier to get the support and for Ukraine. Because when you speak generally about numbers and about the necessity to help, about the democracy, sometimes these very important topics remain topics. They do not show what's behind them. But when you come to some village and talk to a woman who was raped by Russian soldiers, not one but several times, and then try to find the way how to show this story to people in the United States and worldwide, then people understand that this is what Russia brings to Ukraine, and this is what Russia is going to bring to other countries if we let them do that. Since May, I'm working as a strategic communications expert at Ukrinform, and my work there is also aimed at giving up voices to Ukraine and to Ukrainian people, which I think is very important. And this is why I thank everyone who is supporting this and who is speaking for Ukraine, because I know that a lot of you do this through all possible means. And apart from this, me and my colleague Artem Lysak, who is here now, a prominent Ukrainian journalist, we decided to launch a project which is called Decoding Ukraine. And the idea of the project is to show stories of people who are left behind the headlines, who are not seen, who are not heard, and give them a voice. Because when you come somewhere where an awful massacre happened, or where, as in this piece, you will see Russia killed 59 people in the village that consisted of 200 people, so every fourth in just one single village. When you come there, very often people want to talk to you because they want you to become their voice. They want the world to see and to hear what they are going through. And they ask you to show and to tell others what is happening there, because they feel abandoned, they feel isolated, and they want media to come and to be their voice. So we started this, and I hope that we will be able to proceed. And I welcome you to watch this short story from Razom village, where on October 5th, Russian Iskander missile killed 59 civilians who gathered in a small cafe for a funeral of the fallen soldier.
Цілую доню, піду в ад. І я буду їх карати. Я, не Люцифери, не чорти, я їм покажу, як карати.
Я прийду, каже, всі новості знаю і тобі перезвоню, розкажу. Ну, бачите, не перезвоню.
Должны пам'ятник поставити корові за те, що спасла вас.
Ждуни ждуть. Ну, тепер, може, не будуть вже ждати.
любимий хризантеми горшочок. Так, я з мамою зранку говорила, вона казала, що я прийду, каже, всі новості знаю і тобі передзвоню, розкажу. Ну, бачите, не передзвоню. Який кошмар, я просто...
Пускай.
Олексій ховатиме тут рідного брата та його...
Це Петін брат.
Сестра і мати. Вся родина Олексія родом з Грози, каже, на ті поминки.
То я правильно розумію, ви не пішли, бо вам потрібно було...
З коровою. А ми якраз приводимо поки туди-сюди, Галя поки подоїть, поки те саме. Отвезти в садок треба ж. Прибити треба те саме. Так що так вийшло.
І ще
То ваша корова врятувала...
І ще огород.
А
Огород
казав на роботі, там у мене хлопець каже, ви повинні пам'ятник поставити корові за те, що спасла вас. Вітька, наприклад, хто його знає, як він буде сам без Зойки
Молодежі
жити.
стало менше.
Ей, а видно абсолютно. Моя хорошая. Жить треба. Це мій кусок хліба. У нас тільки зарплату платять, камінь я роблю. А завтра вдруг роботи не буде. І що?
А то ти
А ви і вранці,
рано і вечір.
Да, ну вечір. Скільки ти утром будеш?
Після 6.
Я не заживати не буду.
Після 6 я прийду.
Тоді
Після 6 я прийду.
Таке положення, що...
Я можу сам.
Та в нас старша, он, нічого не із чорна. Там отакого росту вона у мене, худенька, мабуть, вже всі 40 кілограм. Там, кажу, що ти твориш?
Поцілую доню, піду в ад. І я буду їх карати. Я, не Люцифери, не чорти, я їм покажу, як карати. Ну хіба ж можна? Ой, матінко моя. Ой-ой-ой-ой. Чорти такої казні не придумають, яку я їм придумав. Вона вже є, як я їх буду наказувати. Я 2 рази їздив, 3-й раз я не доїхав. Я на греблі впав, назад велик прикотив, я не мог сісти. Кажу, все. Вона ворувалася, я її не пустив. Люба, заповни, якими вони були, красивими і щасливими.
Ішов там і зразу так умивався, я зразу зрозуміла, що все. Потім він мені сказав, прийшов, мене не пустив туди. Тоді каже, я ще зараз. Він сів на велосипед і поїхав туди. І знову минут через 20 приїжджає і каже, Люба, нема наших дітей, я їх бачу.
як діти, Люба?
Тримаються, але найменша, 10-річна Настенька. Днем нічого, а вечором уже як вечір. До папи, до мами просить. З нею. А фотографій багато, я можу зайти на... Оце відео. Відео десь є. Оце відео. Це вона, мама їй тут розказує, вона блінчик шора.
Резко. Давай, ты ж молодец, бегом. На. Давай, слідкуй за блинчиком.
Бачите, тут зараз і магазину нема, ніхто не... То хоч в магазин там підеш, візьмеш, що там необхідний прийшов. Я з ними не... І на лавочку, то коли птицю пасла, тепер я не випускаю, ніде не виходжу, щоб їх не бачити тих. Ждунів, як то кажуть, ждуни ждуть. Ну, тепер, може, не будуть вже ждати, хто їх знає.
Thank you so much, Maria. And that video is so incredible to see those people and to hear exactly what every single person go through. It's so important to hear the story, not just the number, again and again and again, as we keep saying. Dr. Ahmad, if you can give us your opening remarks as well, and we're also going to watch a video.
Hello, everyone. I am Ahmad Aldbis. I am from Syria. I born and live in Syria till 2017. I start my work as a humanitarian and health worker inside Syria, and I respond to the people, to the victims after the demonstrations and after they were detainees. I am the representative of UOSSM. I am operation director, and UOSSM is non-profit medical health organization working in Syria from 2011. And this organization established by this diaspora doctor in Paris, and worked in Syria, in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Jordan, and in Yemen, in a crisis area in Pakistan and other countries. And we already here in Ukraine. We are here because the victims are not numbers. We started our work here in Ukraine because we know the pain. We know how the victims and how the people after conflict and during the conflict feeling, and what the impact of conflict on people, especially in health aspects, especially in the related wounded to the war. So we as organization, and because we believe and we are a medical organization and we care about the lives of people and those affected by conflict and disasters. And we believe that they have the right to life and they have the right to dignified life. And we know how valuable and human life is, and it is not number, but rather the life of people who have their dreams, have their hopes, and have their goals. And they have an impact on the society in which they live. As we begin our work from the beginning of the conflict and documented the arrest and killing and forced displacement and a large number of volunteers who work in humanitarian and relief and health sector, how significant the impact of this was on the affected community and how much it affected their lives and well-being. We can show a video about the conflict in Syria and how it started and the result of conflict on the host community, the results of conflict on health workers, on humanitarian workers, and how the price of being with the victims. Please, the video.
وتحولها إلى كارثة كبرى رغم الفاجعة التي سببتها الأرقام. كان الرش بالمياه وقطع الملابس للأطفال والرجال.
فقد الناس الأمان، فقد الناس موارد معيشتهم، فقد الناس مؤسساتهم الطبية إلى حد ما الذي نحاول أن نعوض هذا النقص. فقدوا كل شيء.
يحتاجوا شيء ضل 1 ل 3 من 1000 بدهم انعاشات متقدمه اكثر مثل الضغط الصدري.
إذ نشأت علاقة عدائية بين السوريين والشتاء.
مشان حفظ الجثث الموتى.
بمدة أطول لتحقق فائدة أكاديمية للمتدربين أكثر.
دوركم الحقيقي أكيد جزء منه التعامل مع الاضطرابات الموجودة، التعامل مع الاضطرابات النفسية، حملات التوعية إلى آخره، بس في جزء كثير مهم وكثير كبير ومن وجهة نظري هو الأكثر أهمية، هو رفع التوعية في مجال
Yes, because they are not numbers, we show how the individual's role in rebuilding health system during the conflict, in spite of destruction of health system, targeting and bombardment on health facilities and on education centers, on all civilian and bazaars in Syria, still working by individuals, by organization, by humanitarian workers, by health workers to rebuild and to fill the gap after the regime with their alliance and destroyed the health system. Yes, thousands of hundreds of detainees, hundreds of thousands of dead, hundreds of thousands of orphans, thousands of hundreds of thousands of widows, tens of thousands of disabled people, millions of forcibly IDPs, millions of forced migrants. They are victims, are not numbers. They were not numbers and they will never be numbers. Because they are not numbers, we are gathered here in order to tell their stories and hear their voices, which were silenced by the sounds of bullets that killed them and the prison bars that kept them hidden. Here I will speak about Dr. Hassan Al-Araj story. Dr. Hassan Al-Araj, he is a cardiologist. He is the one and the only doctor in his area in Hama, and how millions of people he served in this area, and what the role of Dr. Hassan Al-Araj in establishment and the creation of health system inside Syria after the beginning of conflict, and how he and his colleagues and doctors rebuild the health system, and how they tried to fill this gap. Dr. Hassan, you show in the video, and the role of Dr. Hassan Al-Araj, he played a significant role in establishing a field hospital underground, because he believes that the life of people is very important. So he, with his doctors and with the people worked with, establish the first underground hospital to protect health workers and the injured inside them, to ensure the availability of medical services to relieve and the pain of suffering of patients after the Syrian regime and its allies drive them obtaining the freedom. Dr. Hassan Al-Araj played a very big role in establishment of health directorates and management of health system inside Syria with the other directorates. As you know, after the conflict started, the regime and the aircraft of regime targeted the hospitals, the primary health centers, the bazaars, and no health services on the ground because the regime prevent access to health facilities. So the doctors inside Syria, because they are not numbers, they start to work with others to build health system and deliver the health services inside Syria. Many stories about more than 950 humanitarian and health workers were killed by the bombardment, by targeting. Hundreds of detainees in the prisons now. So we are here together to work together to participate in human rights and in accountability of the killers and criminal, especially the same killer and the same criminal here in Ukraine and in Syria. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And we'll go into some questions later on, specifically about hospital targeting. But next, Evelina, if you can tell us about your work at Razom and your perspective on this question.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eva, and I'm the head of Razom organization, but based in Ukraine. I wanted to start from me personal. I was raised in a family, and my parents learned me to stand for things I believe in and to fight for them. And my problem is, my focus was for Ukrainian-Russian relationships or perhaps Ukrainian post-Soviet Union relationships. And now I want to say sorry to people from Syria, because in 2011, I was adult enough to read and to analyze. But I didn't. And now me and my country pay price for things I didn't in 2011. I know Omar quite good. I know lots of people from Syria. And truly, I want to say sorry for my... I didn't want it to read. I didn't want it to know, because it was somewhere far away from me. But now I understand that all of us are united in standing for freedom, in standing in front of different regimes, different dictators, in standing for our fight for rights, because we do have them. And I'm glad to say that I'm Ukrainian, and lots of people here in Ukraine who stand for our rights of freedom for many. That's not from 2022. That's not even from 2014. I have a little daughter. She's 6, and then the full-scale invasion started. We went to the small village in the west part of Ukraine, and it was a cemetery there. And my daughter asked me, "Mom, who's bothering there?" And I told her that's Ukrainian heroes. Oh, lots of them. Yes. When did they died? And we saw the date. It was more than 100 years ago. They were fighting with Russia. But now we need to understand that we are united, and we need to learn lessons. We need to take lessons from the war in Syria. We need to take your experience, your knowledges, to use them here. We need to share knowledges and experience from Ukrainian-Russian invasion and to share it with the world. Yesterday, I had a meeting with Leopoldo. He's from Venezuela, and he told me that they analyzed that 70% of population of the world live under different regimes. That's horrible. We need to share information. Razom, that's a non-profit organization which was founded in 2014 after Ukrainian Revolution of Dignity. And we create organization here to have expertise, knowledges from the ground, from here in Ukraine. And the decision of people which work in my team was to stay here in Ukraine and to stand for our rights we wanted to become a part of victory. We wanted to become a part of rehabilitation of people. We wanted to search for platforms to give Ukraine voices, to talk the stories about horrible things which are going here. And we have different ways how we do our work. Now we have 5 programs. That's one of them is advocacy. We advocate for interest of Ukraine, basically in US, and tomorrow I'm going to DC. We will have like a huge Ukrainian Action Summit. That will be 3rd of it. We travel all over the world. We search for people which are ready to tell their stories. We tell stories from Ukraine. We advocate under governments of different countries and US. That's like a huge part of our work. Another one is Heroes. We work with tactical medicine, radios, different equipment which can save life. Evacuation cars, we help hospitals, military hospitals, and so on. Because people which are on the front line right now, they are not professional soldiers. My brother, he's a surgeon, and he's on the front line as a combat, not as a surgeon, because he already have experience from 2014. Lots of my friends, which are bookkeepers, managers, dancers, they are on the front line. They protect their family and their rights there. Another program, and thank you so much for your work, it's health. Before the full-scale invasion, I worked with, I'm a manager, I'm not a doctor, but I worked with kids with different diseases, as a spinal muscular atrophy, as a scoliosis. We were searching for doctors which come here, learn how to work with these kids, how to treat them, and so on. And that was hard, but I thought that that's the hardest work ever. No, it is not. The hardest thing was then in late February, I was searching for numbers of parents, kids with spinal muscular atrophy, and we're calling them. You need to evacuate your kids, because without treatment, they will die. And our evacuation program started from evacuation of those kids from all over Ukraine to Poland. That was the hardest thing in my work, because I understood that all work we did before, that's nothing. We need just to save their life. And we also work with different NGOs all around Ukraine. Most of them are in Kharkiv, in Dnipro, and Kherson. We give them grants for different programs on the ground, because they know people, they know each person in different villages, and that's very important. They are like our hands on the ground. And the last one, but not the least, it's culture and connection. That's more about not a vision of Ukraine like in Soviet Union was. It's a modern Ukraine with a culture, with a beautiful, even clothing. Now I'm totally in Ukrainian wearing. We do have resources, we do have taste, we do have people which can create beautiful things. And last year we had a huge concert, Carols of the Bells, in New York, and Razom was part of organizers. As personal stories, I have lots of them. I have lots of them from 2014, because my boyfriend, now he's my husband, he's a neurosurgeon, and he went to the military hospital as a surgeon. And I was bringing medicine, I was visiting hospital a lot, and I saw a lot there. Later, I worked in Razom, and we have lots of mental health stories, and that's like, it's very painful even to try to remember them. The most shocked things for me was a small kid which almost didn't talk, and he stopped eating meat. And we couldn't understand why he's not eating meat. And a mental health specialist worked with him, and later we understood then they were evacuating from their hometown. He saw a burned car with bodies on it. and he felt the smell of human burned meat. And he just stopped eating this. Just imagine how horrible things kids in Ukraine see. Even my daughter, which she was under bombing. All of kids in Ukraine were under this, and that's like, sounds horrible. She traveled with me everywhere. She saw hospitals, she saw people there, she saw mental health centers, refugee centers, military bases. I don't know the place where she haven't been with me, but she's like, Mom, I died. You can't even imagine her eyes. Then we turned back to Kyiv, and she said, Mom, I had no idea. Would we turn back in our home? Would I ever see my friends again? Would I ever see my teddy bear? That was like, she's different. I am different. We all are. The challenges right now is don't let evil come into our hearts as much as we will become as the dictators and the regimes. But to stand and to fight for freedom, unite, because dictators, they are united in their action, in things what they do, and we need to unite too by countries, by people, by NGOs, and so on. We have very similar programs, and that's fantastic. So, sorry again to all people in Syria. I learned that lesson. Now I work a lot with young people, and I share this lesson with them, and hope to travel to Syria, to free Syria, to very beautiful, hope to see the beauty of this country.
Thank you so much, Eva. That was so beautiful. And I resonated one thing, and I want to echo that. As us, more than half of our population was displaced, 12 million of us. And, we're all over the world. We migrated through boats. People lost families in the ocean. Every single person's story is different than the other person. And the cultural that you spoke about, the last program that you spoke about, is so important because now we're all over the world. And I have an analogy that I say there's little Syria now in every corner of the world. So we need to also focus on keeping, it's so dark and we've been through so much as a people, all of us collectively. But I think that focusing on keeping our culture, keeping our identity, keeping our beautiful traditions and values is so important, even if we're living halfway across the world, living far away from our families, from our loved ones, and going through all of that. It's so important as well. So thank you so much. Last but not least, Elly, please, if you would tell us more about your work at the David Nott Foundation.
Thank you. And just want to say huge thanks also to the organizers of this incredible event, to Olga, Katinka, Vera, and Celine as well, who've worked so hard to bring us all here today. I'm from the UK. I don't know what it's like to live under the threat of constant airstrikes. I don't know what it's like to live under the threat of chemical weapons attacks, of shelling from supposedly my own government. But I feel deeply, deeply connected, and I'm really honored to be here sharing this platform with my Syrian and Ukrainian friends. So if we're talking stories, I met in 2014, I met a man called David Nott, who would, within a year, we would get married, have our first daughter, and have another baby called the David Nott Foundation, which we set up together, for the purpose of training doctors in the surgical skills they need to provide relief and assistance in conflict zones. And when I married David, I quickly realized that I would be sharing him with about a couple of dozen Syrian doctors who he loves like brothers and who does to this day. And he's added a lot of Ukrainian brothers and sisters to that as well, because he's dedicated his life to helping people in conflict zones and to creating survivors from victims, because that's the idea with what we do with surgical training on the front line, that instead of having just victims, you can have survivors. You can save limbs, you can save lives, you can help. And not only help by doing that, operating ourselves, but by empowering local healthcare workers to be able to save their own people and to share that knowledge with their colleagues. But going back to Syria, they're not numbers. They're people like Mohammed Wasim Maz. And I visited a hospital named after him last year in northern Syria, just over the border from Kilis in Turkey. And Mohammed Wasim Maz was known as the last pediatrician in Aleppo. He was killed in an airstrike in April 2016 by probably a Russian plane. And to visit the hospital that was named after him was an intensely moving and precious experience for me. Made all the more precious when I visited their neonatal unit and was greeted by a very articulate, very brilliant Syrian pediatric surgeon who told me that for the last 6 months they'd been working without salaries because UNICEF had cut the funding, but who spoke with such dignity and such poise and without a hint of self-pity that I found incredibly moving and can often be quite jarring when you return to the UK and people are moaning about absolutely everything. But it was all the more moving because 2 years earlier, our second daughter, when she was first born, was gravely ill and had to spend a week in the neonatal intensive care unit at Chelsea Westminster Hospital in London. And just being there in northwestern Syria, I was so struck by, again, just how fortunate I was to live in the UK, to have recourse to the kind of medical facilities that we do, but how so many around the world don't have that. And so I've dedicated my life to trying to make that a reality for more people worldwide. So doctors in Syria are remarkable, they're extraordinary. They've long been a leadership community. And that's partly because before the revolution, organizing campaigns around healthcare was one of the few areas of civic space where people could organize, where people could set up organizations and charities. And so it was an area for kind of low-level political organization even before the revolution. But since the revolution, there has been such an extraordinary outpouring of civil society organization by doctors and healthcare workers in Syria. They've set up remarkable organizations that have helped to ground ideas like human rights and open societies. We've talked a lot about those ideas at this conference, but it's often been from an international legal level, quite elite level. And what I'm always interested in is how we ground these things, make them everyday lived practices, make them accessible to people. And you saw in that incredible video, the Idlib Health Directorate, what were people doing? They were posting votes in a clear perspex box. And in Syria, having a free and fair election, even if it's to something like a health board, is truly a kind of revolutionary act in itself. And that's the sort of space that is opened up when you have a revolution, when you have people taking to the streets saying, we demand freedom, we demand our dignity. And that's what was starting to take place in Syria before it was so comprehensively crushed by the regime. So we've been talking about new ways of thinking. And in the humanitarian sector, there's a lot of talk about localization, but it's rarely acted upon and supported in a significant way. And one of the things I'm doing PhD research at the moment at King's College London alongside my work with the foundation. And I want to look at how better we can support locally led organizations and civil society organizations, not just in Syria, but in Ukraine and beyond, and getting away from this idea that we need the big INGOs to sweep in and make everything okay, because the locally led organizations, every response is local. in the first instance. And we heard that very much with the earthquake in Syria in the northwest, where the white helmets were literally digging people out with their hands because they couldn't get hold of the specialist search and rescue equipment. So what I want to say to governments around the world is that they've got to start treating locally led organizations with dignity and with respect. And part of that is longer term funding. So rather than just giving 1-2 year funding cycles, it's got to be serious for long terms, 5 to 8 years perhaps. They've also got to invest in governance. So rather than just giving money for projects, governance needs to be supported too, because by supporting governance, you're supporting those small p political processes, things like elections, things like organization, that really, really help to embed those values in a society and getting away from just an emergency response. Also protection. Healthcare, I'll talk about this more later, but healthcare has come under attack in such an astonishing manner in the Syrian conflict. And likewise, at the start of the war in Ukraine, I wrote an article for the British Medical Journal entitled "Why I Fear for Ukraine's Healthcare Workers." And sure enough, healthcare has similarly been under an extraordinary level of bombing, attack, healthcare workers detained and tortured as well. So physical protection of hospitals is important, but also training for healthcare workers in how they collect evidence of atrocities, because healthcare workers are at the front line of these conflicts. They're witness to human rights contraventions, human rights abuses, and incredibly well placed to collect evidence and be the articulate voices of support and allyship that they often are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elly. And we're so grateful for people like you and for people like David that recognize, to a certain degree, their power and privilege and see the difference between, as you said, your story about your daughter, personalizing that and seeing that we are so privileged to have these things wherever we live around the world compared to people that don't. So thank you. When it comes to UN statistics and UN numbers, in Syria, the UN stopped counting the number of dead a long time ago, several years ago, because it just couldn't keep up with the count. And that number back then, which is over 5 years, I'm not going to say the number, but it's around 400,000 people. And then we also know that the UN in around 2016, as Bashar al-Assad, Russia, and Iran were besieging Aleppo, gave hospital coordinates to Russia to not bombard these hospitals, because guess what? This is an extreme crime against humanity. If you're bombing hospitals, where the places that you're bombing, this is where people are getting treated. But then they bombed those hospitals, and we have immense records of that. And I recommend watching Wa'ad Khatib's movie, For Sama, for more specifics on that and the besiegement in Aleppo. But Dr. Muhammad, I wanted to ask, what does it mean when these war criminals are targeting hospitals and targeting medical facilities and killing doctors who are the saving line of these human beings?
Thank you, Celine, for your question. And thank you for all of you for the topics you mentioned before. Yes, about maybe the point of deconfliction mechanism, which is established by UN agencies and sharing the coordinates of hospital. The people, the doctors believe that if these hospitals will be deconflicted, it means it will not be targeted and it will not be as bombardment or targeting directly to those hospitals. But unfortunately, 33 hospitals in Aleppo were targeted and it documented, and many of doctors were killed, many of injured also were killed, many of people were not able to access to health facilities. So targeting the hospital not only to prevent people access to health services, there are direct killing and indirect killing. When you target the doctors and hospital, you not only destroy the hospital and kill the health workers and doctors. You kill the people which they should visit this hospital, and the services maybe can be provided by those doctors on the ground. The goal of targeting or to kill the hope, to kill the dreams, to kill the life of people and the future of their life. Not only hospital, also schools is they targeted and destroyed it. You cannot send your children to schools because you know this is a legitimate target for the regime and Russian forces. Many of students, many of teachers were killed in schools. The son of my sister, he was killed in Has. He were as refugees and displaced in IDPs in the school. And in 2016, the school was targeted and he was killed. His father, 12 years ago in prison, in regime area, 12 years they didn't know where are he. And you know, now in Syria, each family have some people killed, some detainees, some disappeared, some with disabilities, all those victims. So we now, also we as humanitarian workers, we are victims, we are refugees, we have also pain, and we our feeling all time about our families, about our people on the ground and what they are suffering on the ground. A week ago, the regime forces and Russian forces started targeting northwest Syria. More than 23 medical facilities were targeted, and it documented by UN agencies. More than 10 of humanitarian and education centers were targeted. 2 centers of white helmets also were targeted. 3 of humanitarian workers were killed. We can add this number to 950 of health workers were killed and documented by PHR and by SNHR. Now in Gaza, we were speaking about the victims. Now, 2 days ago, more than 5 hospitals were targeted, and more than 75 people were killed, included civil defense, included doctors, included nurses, and nobody cared about them. The people, the civilian, must be deconflicted, must be out of conflict. They are civilian. You know, also in war, there are principles, there are rights. You know, it must they respect the principles and the right of life for people. So we are, I know we cannot stop the war, but we can together build the hope and treat people, and together maybe we can hold the criminal accountable, and we can maybe achieve and play our role in delivering the evidences and delivering the reasons of what happened in Syria or in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. And by the way, this morning we woke up to our colleagues in Idlib. We have an app called Syria Watch that you can download off the App Store or off whatever, and it tells you live attacks that take place with the coordinates and where exactly. So today, this morning at 5 a.m., I think there was 8 raids on the city of Idlib. So this is nothing of like the past. This is happening every single day on the residents of Northwest Syria. So Maria, I'm going to go back to you. And when the full-scale invasion took place, you sent out your family and you decided to stay back and to document the war crimes that were taking place. What was the toll of that on you, the people you were working with, and what stories stood out that remove the number off those people and show the actual scale of the invasion that took place.
Thank you for the thank you for the question. I don't want to take much of your time. How much do we take? We have for this, like 5 minutes, up to 5, 3. It's just because throughout for this 600 days of the war, which we marked yesterday, I have so many stories. I can speak for days, and it's very difficult to tell which stories are the most striking or the most horrible or the most important, because every story matters of every civilian, every person. As for speaking about Kharkiv, it's just because it's my home city. All people fled out of the city in the beginning of the war, and there were no press or media inside. Because there was this fear that Russian troops might take over Kharkiv. And yesterday I watched Reuters did a story to the 600 days of the war, and the first picture they put on the cover is a picture from just the Kharkiv, on the outskirts of Kharkiv, where the Russian destroyed military vehicles have been. So it was a real threat that the Russians will take over the city. And that's why it was important to show what the city is going through, and people living in the metro, people sheltering in the bomb shelters of the destroyed buildings in Saltivka, and the people helping others and helping in these circumstances, because only due to the volunteer help did the city survive in the first most horrible weeks of the invasion. So there are a lot of stories to tell, but what I want to underline here is that behind each personal story, there is a story of the village, of the small town, of the big city. Because every Russian war crime and every Russian atrocity, it brings suffering not only to one specific individual or his family, but it targets the whole society, the whole area where these people live. It eliminates the possibility for future development. If we look at Kharkiv and the number of schools and hospitals and other vital facilities that are needed for the 2 million city to survive, all of them were destroyed. And there are some effort now for rebuilding Ukraine. But to look realistically, the city is 40 kilometers from the border with Russia. And no one, and especially now, is going to pour money to rebuild all that was destroyed. And this is a huge problem which has to be resolved, because Russia knows this perfectly well and then continue doing this. They target Kharkiv and other cities for that reason, because they can, and they know they are not accountable, and because they understand that every strike is not only killing civilians and destroying just this exact building or school or hospital, but this is making impossible for this city or village to develop further for years. You have mentioned here a lot about the hospitals being targeted. One of the most striking story I worked was in Kherson region. You all know that most of the children abducted by Russia from Ukraine were from Kherson. There was an orphanage there from where Russian soldiers put more than 40 children under 5 on the buses and just took them to the territory of occupied Crimea. And there were several people in Kherson Regional Hospital who tried to save these children by forging the papers and saying that these children are ill. So they took several of them as much as they could. They hidden them in the hospital, and then they showed Russians the papers. Allegedly, these children were ill, but they were not. They did this just to hide these children. And we met these doctors, truly heroes of the war, who continue to work. They are still there while we are here in a relatively safeless space. They continue to work there under constant Russian bombardment. Russia is shelling Kherson every day. And I asked them why are they doing that and where they find this courage. And they said, it's because it's our work, someone has to do it. If we leave from Kherson, who will stay and who will help these children? Who will go on the other bank of Dnipro River, which is currently occupied, and help children there, because there are no Russian doctors on that side. So they do it. They use boats to go under the shelling and under the bombardment to help children. And by these remarkable stories of individuals, of doctors, teachers, just normal Ukrainians who in these awful circumstances, under the constant threat of being killed, are continuing doing their work. This is why Ukraine is still resisting. This is why Ukraine is fighting, and this is why Ukraine will win in this war, because no one can break or crush the nation that is so strong and that is standing strong for more than 600 days now.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I have two questions just to wrap up finally, some things. To Elly, also just what does the world need to know about these doctors that are operating, that you guys work with, that are operating in conflict zones, that are trying to do their best in such difficult circumstances? What is their message and what do you guys see that they go through? And we need to be kind of quick. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Their resilience is extraordinary, but we shouldn't count on it so much. And I think it makes it easier for us to go, oh, they can put up with so much. They shouldn't have to. We need to get a bit more serious and a bit more robust in defending our values. We really, really do. And it's something in the UK that I think we sit back and we count on, first of all, the Syrians to do their bit to stand up for democracy and human rights. And now we're relying so much on Ukraine to have this fight for us. But if we don't give Ukraine everything it needs right now, then it doesn't bear thinking about. And I think the great Winston Churchill once compared appeasement of Hitler to feeding a crocodile. And you can keep tossing it bits of meat, but eventually you're going to run out of meat. And we can't do that. We have to be more serious now about defending our values. These doctors shouldn't have to cope with what they are having to go through constantly. Ahmad has just spoken. Idlib is under attack again. I had a great friend who was there a few weeks ago, and it was a period of relative quiet in Idlib. And he said when he left that people were starting to repair the roads, open businesses again, relax a little. But then 48 hours after he returned over the border, it was again being completely hammered by Russia and the Syrian regime. Again, where's the accountability? Where's the justice? The mental health toll, just a final word on this, is extraordinary. A great friend of mine, Ola Abara, has conducted some research recently showing that particularly the anticipatory stress of things like double tap airstrikes is absolutely crucifying them. If you haven't heard of a double tap, basically a Russian jet or a Syrian artillery, battery will shell an area once, a marketplace perhaps, a mosque, a school, and the first responders will come. But then when everyone's there trying to rescue the wounded, evacuate people, they will drop another bomb and kill some more people. And that breathtaking cynicism is what we're up against, and we need to be really realistic about it. We need to throw our arms around the healthcare workers, around the civil society, around the communities, around Ukraine, around northwest Syria, and we need to get really serious about protecting them and giving them all they need.
Thank you so much, Elly. And Eva, last but not least, we are also we're a Syrian American organization, and I think an important part of what we do at the Syrian Emergency Task Force is tell the stories to the world, because I think a mistake that a lot of us did is that we thought that the whole world knew what happened in our country, but that was not true. So it's important to be able to tell the stories in a way that people can understand them and we can humanize these stories, because the numbers are huge, as we keep saying. So how do you guys do that? Is there a specific mechanism of telling the world the stories of what Ukrainians went through?
First of all, collaboration. We make partnerships with different organizations all around the world. As I said before, we're going to have a Ukrainian Action Summit, but its main function is to work with U.S. congressmen and with people based in U.S. which have a rights of voice. But we are partners in creation of Ukrainian coalition. So that's not just Ukrainian-based organization. That's organization from Syria, Georgia, US, and many, many countries all around the world which do support Ukraine because they do understand that all of us are parts of the chain. And I wanted to say that, yes, it is important to say, that's my pain. What's happening in Ukraine, I was crying when I saw those videos because that's my personal pain. I remember kids which I saw in Odessa on my own eyes. That's my pain because I know people which worked in hospitals, and that's my personal pain. I scare for my brother, I scare for my friends, and that's mine. But I do understand that people somewhere in another part of the world, yes, perhaps they understand the pain, but that's not their pain. That's not their problem yet. They can become their problems, but they don't understand, as I didn't in 2011. And I think we need to explain that I have a friend, she's Georgian, and she had 2 sons. The elder one died on Georgia-Russian war, and another one died on Ukrainian-Russian war. And she was standing with a big board, then Russian people came to Georgia. That was painful for her. That's not learned lessons. We need to learn lessons, to share the story, and to explain that people which will run away from the regime, they will go to Europe and America. And perhaps you will have problems with those people because you need to take care about them, you need to make social programs, and so on. And that's not just about moving people. That's Russia in 2014 stopped in Donetsk and Luhansk, and there were kids there. Now they are not kids. 8 years later, they are teenagers or adult Ukrainian kids which stand with weapons in front of other part of Ukraine. And if Russia will occupy Ukraine 8, 10 years later, now kids will stand with the weapons in front of Poland, Europe. And that's not because we want this. That will happen. And we will have like a huge problems in Europe. Now yes, we do need help. We ask for help. We are ready to fight. We are ready to stand for freedom. We pay an incredible price for these in this war and for rights we fight for. But we do need help. We need partners. We call for partnership and for unity.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Ahmad, if you want to wrap up also your final remarks, and then we can get off.
Okay, thank you. I only maybe sharing the stories of victims and the mechanism of documentation in health system for those victims during the conflict, especially for Syrian. We have very good experience with 12 years of conflict. So I know the similar contexts, the similar stories, but we should share it with each other, and maybe we can create the evidence of a crime. And I think such kind of conferences and workshops maybe can help in hearing the voices of victims, which they cannot deliver to others. I would like to thank all of you. Thank also the organizer, Katinka, Olga, and Veronica, Celine, and all to give us the opportunity to attend this kind of conferences. And I thank also Slava Ukraina for Ukraine, and Slava for Syria, and for all countries witnesses disaster or conflict. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for listening to our voices, always.